A much-needed win for Jerome Tang as PJ Haggerty commits to Kansas State. Does that mean the Cats can go back to dancing? Let's talk right here on Locked On Kansas State.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers, and we are in a great mood today because yesterday was a Memorial Day to remember. PJ Haggerty commits to Kansas State, and it changes the aspect of this roster and flips it right on its head. So much excitement to talk about. We're going to dive into it in this episode. Before we do so, this episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. PJ Haggerty is an absolute stud. And for the amount of money that Kansas State just got him at, $2.5 million, not the $4 million price tag that many thought it was going to take, it's an absolute steal. This is a player that was third in the country, third in the entire nation in points per game last year at 21.7. Also rebounded almost 6 per game. That's 3.7 assists per game and shot almost 48% from the field, including 36.4% from the three-point line. Great three-throw shooter as well. Lots of things on that stat line I just mentioned are things that were much needed for Kansas State last year. He was better as he went this last season, including a 42-point, a career-high scoring output in the quarterfinals of the AAC tournament against Wichita State. This is an absolute shooter. This is an absolute dog. And this is somebody who should absolutely be the star of Kansas State in 2025. Will he be enough? That's the biggest question. And to make sure I was getting everything covered, I spoke with Isaac Schade of Locked On College Basketball to make sure we discussed it in full. PJ Haggerty coming to the Wildcats.
Man, it's great to be joined today on Locked On College Basketball by our guy, Christian Rauh, the host of Locked On K-State. First appearance, I believe, on Locked On College Basketball. Christian, it's great to have you. It's good to be here. I live just a few hours away from Manhattan, so I'm super glad to be chatting about the Wildcats today and the massive big news of Memorial Day. PJ Haggerty is off the market. He goes to Jerome Tang's Wildcats. Christian, just immediate takeaways from this. What was your thought? I know this has been a potential thing, but what was your thought when the news actually hit?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. First-time caller, long-time supporter of Locked On College Basketball. But, this was huge. And I guess you want to call it a Memorial Day to remember for Kansas State and for especially Jerome Tang. This is something that was absolutely needed for Jerome Tang. I have been saying this entire offseason, Isaac, that this is a very underwhelming offseason for Jerome Tang and staff, especially after missing the dance, not just one, but 2 years in a row after having that Elite Eight appearance as soon as he showed up. Hey, this is a moment for Jerome Tang where he can finally maybe start living up to that resume that he said after beating Kansas in Lawrence a few years ago, stepping up on the scoreboards table and saying, get used to winning here. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Because I remember it quite well.
Vividly.
And that hasn't really happened since that type of scenario happening. If PJ Haggerty can be what he was last year, which was exciting, the American Player of the Year, American Athletic Player of the Year, if he can do that at a Big 12 level, then I'm stoked. Can he do that with this roster they've created? That's another question. We'll see what happens moving forward, though.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a great point, Christian, because we've seen him do it back-to-back years now at the AAC level with both Tulsa and then last year Memphis, as you said, started in the Big 12 at TCU, but he only had 2-ish points a game there. But, of course, he was a freshman. Who knows? And now he's blossomed. Speaking of which, I guess PJ Haggerty really likes purples and blues with his team, with all of this bookending his career with the purple with some blue sandwiched in between. But, I mean, you look at this for Jerome Tang, as you said, and it's like brings in, I mean, this is now 2 20-point scorers that have transferred in. I haven't looked around and done the research yet, but I bet it's going to be hard pressed to find anybody else in the nation who's brought in two guys that have scored at that level. But the thing is, it's PJ that did it at Memphis last year, but also Abdi Bashir, who did it at Monmouth, which is not exactly the same level as Memphis or obviously the Big 12. And, what is it? Three other guys that all scored in double figures last year that transfer in, but at Bowling Green and Akron and UNC Wilmington. And so, Christian, I guess the question is, can PJ help level these guys up to the Big 12? Do you see that happening?
I hope so. I really do hope that's the case. Do I think it can happen? Well, when you look at Memphis, I think Memphis is a really good and interesting team, right? Because yes, they are seen in the American Athletic Conference, but I think what Hardaway has done with that squad over the last couple seasons, and we've seen it also happen as well. Look, they made the tournament last year at large bid, really. Or at least they won their conference, but they could have been in that large bid, right?
Yes.
Okay, so they could have been. Either way, Kansas State did not, and they didn't in the last 2 years. So you're looking at a player that has tournament experience, went on a winner, something that you say about some of these other players. I love Bashir. I love what he actually brings to the squad. He's not afraid to shoot the three, but Monmouth was not a winner of a program. We will see if he can be able to turn these players, into winners. That will be the big thing. And Bashir's one of them. But also Nate Johnson. Let's talk Nate Johnson, named the MAC player and defensive player of the year. The defense part is going to be really important because some of these other players that are coming over are not very good defensively. Look, Jerome Tang knows how to coach defense. That has never really been an issue, defensive efficiency with Kansas State while Jerome Tang's been in-house. Offense was a complete and utter problem last year, and that seems to be the main focus for Kansas State this offseason, although I feel a little underwhelmed about it. When you add PJ Haggerty into the mix, you add Bashir into the mix, you add Nate Johnson in the mix, Marcus Johnson as well, coming over from Bowling Green, not afraid to shoot the three as well. There is a lot of offensive potential on this squad that, in my opinion, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, a little bit later with Matt Driscoll. In my opinion, this offense has to get better. You can't score just 70 points a game and expect to have a winning record in the Big 12.
Yeah, well, if last year is any indication of that, PJ would have 2 out of every 7 of those points. And so, but Christian, I think that's part of it too, is it feels like what PJ is going to have to do as part of this roster is, because he's such an electric scorer, and hopefully the rest of these guys can level up to the Big 12 level, is if the game plan is to, I just think about like Kelvin Sampson, for example, game prepping for K-State, is going to want to shut down PJ Haggerty. And so the question is, can he rise above, last year at Memphis, let me look back real quick, 3.7 assists a game, 3.3 turnovers a game. And so it's like PJ is going to have to find a way to involve the rest of his teammates, lower those turnovers and raise those assists, so that it's not just like, let's focus in on PJ and stop him. Do you see that in his game? Do you think he can bring that to the table?
He's going to have to find a way to be more of a facilitator for sure, because I expect, just based on what you're bringing in this offseason, for them to run a lot more of this combo guard styled play. When you look at bringing in Nate Johnson and Bashir and Kostic, even the international player they're bringing in, as well as Haggerty, none of them are really true the number ones. And you can even say the freshman last year, David Castillo, who's going to be the lone sophomore on this squad, isn't really a true number one as well. So there's not really a true point guard on this squad. Not sure you really need it, especially when you went with the best player available left in the portal with PJ Haggerty. Yeah. But you're going to have to find a way to build facilitation with all these shooters that are going to not only be looking for minutes, but looking for scoring and not afraid to shoot as well. Something that we really struggled with last year was rebounds, and I don't really see that improving this year as well. If you find a type of player like Bashir, like Johnson's, who, and I said Johnson's with plural, I appreciate that. I meant that. They're not afraid to shoot it, and they shoot often too. That means you're probably going to get, and again, we're going to talk offensive strategy in a minute, but you're probably going to get them shooting very early in the shot clock, meaning if you don't make those shots at a decent clip, you're going to have to fight for those rebounds. That makes me nervous, and that is the biggest issue that I'm worried about with Kansas State now with this squad. Can PJ Haggerty do it all? I don't think that he's that well-rounded of a player enough on the defensive side and rebound side to do so. But facilitation has to be the biggest thing that Haggerty steps forward in heading into the new year. Can he do that? Well, I sure hope so. I sure hope so, because he is going to be the dude. He has to be the dude for this season if Kansas State wants to make it back to the dance.
I think part of making it back to the dance is having a dude at point guard or at, combo guard, as we're talking about here. A couple years ago when that happened, obviously, it was the Marquise Noel show, the whole King of New York thing at MSG. Now, with Keontae Johnson as, I don't even know if you'd call it Batman and Robin. It's like Batman Val Kilmer and Batman George Clooney, or whoever you want to go with.
I like that.
But, so critically, it wasn't just Marquise Noel, but he was the head of the snake on that thing, man. And PJ has 4 inches on him, as I think back to because Marquise like 5'11", right? Am I remembering that correctly? He's a shorty.
He wasn't tall. Definitely wasn't tall.
And so the question is, can Coach Tang utilize yet another dynamic guard to turn in a better year? Do you see that as a potential helpful thing?
Yeah, PJ Haggerty's basketball IQ is up there. So if there's anybody that can make that step forward on this roster right now, it is him. And Tang was very vocal when it came to talking about the point guard play heading into the year. And he was really vocal about it when they were playing the Jayhawks as well, because they were talking about how it was so nice having a point guard on the court that you could trust. And he says he called it basically having another coach on your squad, a coach on the court. And I think that's what he was searching for this offseason. And I think he finally finds that with PJ Haggerty. Look, you can say what you want from last year's transfer portal, bringing in Coleman Hawkins late. And really, Coleman Hawkins didn't really fit at the point. Now, when Achor left the program, it kind of made a lot more sense, okay, why Coleman Hawkins fits into this style. Because at the moment when they brought him into the portal, they didn't need a 3 or a 4 that Coleman Hawkins really was in this piece. That's why I'm not too worried about them adding a point guard type of play. They look like they're going to switch to that combo style. But can he be the X factor? Can he be the game changer? I think he can at a Big 12 level. And if that's all it takes for them to have a winning record in the Big 12, they'll probably get you on the 8 or 9 line. I can at least do that.
At least. Yes, you would hope so. Now, part of it is PJ Haggerty. We've seen a big price tag associated with his name. It seems like you didn't have to pay that much. And also, thankfully, hopefully this is a better fit than that front court we talked about last year. We'll get to that. Plus, an interesting addition of another head coach stepping into the assistant coach ranks, and that's going to happen at K-State this year. Christian is very excited about it. We'll have that conversation coming up in just a second. Right after Christian and I tell you about Monarch Money. Christian, I don't know about you. You ever check your bank account and be like, dude, where'd all my money go, man? It's so hard, right? Like between dining out or shopping, entertainment. I know you live up there in the Pacific Northwest, man. It's expensive, right?
It is insane. I mean, just looking at gas, for example, right? We're close to $5 a gallon out here. So every penny counts. And thankfully to Monarch Money, who can help me save that little dime every now and again.
Dude, that's exactly right. We love Monarch Money because it's your personal CFO. It gives us visibility over and control over all our finances. It's not just a budgeting app, although that is a critical part of it. It's a complete financial command center where we can track our accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So we stop just like managing our money and actually start working at building wealth. Christian and I were talking before show about he's like looking to buy some land sometime here soon. And something like Monarch Money can really help you stock away for that and help prep for it. And Christian, I know that's something you and your wife, for example, are probably trying to figure out together. And I don't know about you, that Monarch is an app that can really take that stress out of it when you're trying to manage money with your spouse.
I love that you can do it all in one app. Don't have to have a folder on your iPhone of different types of apps. Monarch Money does all of that for you on just one click of the button.
Man, it's incredible, y'all. So take control of your finances just like Christian and I are trying to do, and do that with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Dude, that's such an insane deal, Christian. How could you miss that?
50%, that's half. Any type of shooting, we're talking Locked On College Basketball here. If you're a shooter over 50%, you're like Hall of Fame level. So come on, Monarch Money, perfect timing.
Check it all out, you guys. monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONCollege for half off your first year. All right, Christian Rauh, Isaac Schade here. We're talking PJ Haggerty and K-State. I almost accidentally said Memphis. That's just, reversion there. Now, the good news, Christian, is there had been rumored a massive price tag associated with PJ Haggerty. How big a deal is it for the Wildcats to get him at not that high a level?
Yeah, NIL valuation, if you look at like On3 says like $1.7 million, and that's obviously a little bit lower than what he actually went for. But there were some talks that he was going to go up to like $4 million. I saw a report this weekend when Auburn seemed to be maybe in the mix with NC State, Auburn being in the fact, and if Kansas State was going to be there too, it was a $4 million price tag. And that wasn't the case. It looks like a $2 million NIL deal with incentives as well, up to $500K. So rounding it out at $2.5 million. Hey, look, that's still a lot of money. That's still higher than the Coleman Hawkins price tag that was like top notch for the entire country last year. Now 2.5 is not top notch this year, but that's still the highest NIL deal that Kansas State basketball has ever done. So it's going to say a lot of things for this fans, because I mean, I'm sure you saw it, and I'm sure you talked about it on your show last year as well. The Coleman Hawkins social media thing that happened, how he was dealing with the NIL. Now you're talking about PJ Haggerty, who, although did not get the bag that Memphis offered him at first, but still got a pretty good deal, which in my opinion is now a steal for Kansas State. If there is an ounce of success that does not happen, an ounce of failure, if you want to call it, you're probably going to start seeing those burners. And unfortunate, those burners are probably most likely not Kansas State fans. We found them to be a lot of gambling Twitters. That was like the big issues, but you're probably going to see those come out of the woodwork, unfortunately. But I love it. I love $2.5 million of not my money, but Kansas State NIL. Absolutely a steal for the Wildcats.
And it's funny. You're so spot on, Christian. Like each of these last 3 years, the NIL money has just gone boom, 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 exponentially more. Last year, $2 million was like, what? Great Osibor, $2 million. Coleman Hawkins, $2 million. And now it's like, oh yeah, it's a pretty good bargain to get PJ Haggerty at 2.5, right? Like it's crazy, but that's where we are now. And
this is really like the third year that we're in the mix of NIL, like kind of situation, not third year in a row. But if you remember a few years back, Kansas State was right in the mix with being the top NIL story news with Nigel Pack when he headed to Miami as well. And then Coleman Hawkins. Now this 2.5, although it's a lot of money in Kansas State terms, just on base past experiences, it's nowhere to be found as top notch this year in college basketball.
Oh, man, it's crazy. You mentioned that. And I want to go back to that front court formation last offseason, because there was already the Achora. There was already the Ugana Onyenso. And then add in Coleman Hawkins after he pulls out of the draft. And I'm with you. We even said it the second it happened here on the show. Like, this just feels like it doesn't all fit together, this front court. Like, we kind of saw it. And Chris and I felt bad because K-State fans were like, you guys are just haters and blah, and I was like, no, the front court doesn't work. It feels to me like, I know you said like bringing in several combo guard kind of guys. I feel different about this. I think this can work, unlike the way I felt about the front court last year.
Yeah, well, I hope that you continue that energy. Let me run through like a brick wall or something. Get me going a little more, right? Because I'm not there yet. I want to be, but I'm not there yet. But I do feel differently. I will agree with you there. I'm not as optimistic yet on this half. Look, you got to get me sold on this squad. And the reason that I'm just so nervous to be sold right away, because last year, you sat towards the top of the transfer portal rankings, bringing in Hawkins, bringing in all these other players that were just unsuccessful. This talent level was not there. Why? I take that back. Now, the talent level was there. They underperformed at this talent level. Why did that happen, Isaac? Because they didn't mesh. I don't know what it was, but there was such a slow start to this non-conference schedule last year, which wasn't a very hard non-conference schedule, and they just played from behind all season long. I mean, you were talking about wins against Kansas at home, wins against a ranked Iowa State in Ames, might I mind you. And all of that didn't matter because you wound up losing to Liberty. You wound up losing to a bad LSU team. You wound up losing to a lot of things in non-conference last year that it didn't even matter once you got the Big 12 play. You were basically already out of it. So I really hope that I can be a little more optimistic about this as we go on. You talk about that front court. They still need one more guy, in my opinion. They need one more front court, and hopefully bring in Haggerty can maybe help politicize and lobby one guy in there. Bring it on in, because when you look at these offensive additions, and I'm not even talking about players, I'm talking about on the coaching staff as well, you have a lot of things to be excited about if, and only if, in my opinion, as of right now, you add one more big man. If you do that, then I think this team's dancing. And I'll go ahead and buy the suede shoes now. I'll do it. I'm not afraid.
the purple suede shoes in this case.
Lavender suede shoes. Man,
Yes.
All right.
All in on that. Yeah, I think you're right, Christian. That 6-game winning streak in late January, early February was phenomenal, but unfortunately bookended by like a 9 out of 10 losses and then 6 out of the final 8 after that, and it was just too much. And part of that forces us to turn our attention then to the coaching. And Christian, before we talk about bringing in a head coach to be an assistant for Coach Tang, man, I don't know where to feel about it. Like, that great first year you talked about has had back-to-back losing Big 12 years, not making the big dances you talked about. And it really feels like, I don't know if it's like do or die this year, but man, it's getting to be a very serious time for Jerome Tang to prove himself this year in the Little Apple. Does it feel that way to you?
It absolutely feels that way to me, but I'm not the one that would have to pay the $18 million buyout if that's the case. And that buyout is absolutely insane. But I have gone on record, and I will stick to it even with the addition of PJ Haggerty. If Jerome Tang, and I think this might actually make the stakes even worse for Jerome Tang, if he misses the dance for a third straight year, I don't think there's a single buyout in the world that keeps him at Kansas State for one more season. I just don't think you can, because it's showing that you can bring these players in. And last year, he was very strong about talking about retention. What is one thing that has not happened over the last 2 years with this Kansas State basketball squad? Well, you're looking at it, retention. He wants to talk about this Houston model, get himself to being this Houston type of team where they bring everybody back. And if you look at the Big 12, only them, and I guess you could maybe make the argument BYU, is following that suit. Kansas State, if they want to get to that opportunity, maybe these younger guys that they built in the portal, this underwhelming roster that I'm thinking as of right now, and I hope I'm like the lowest person, by the way, thinking about this roster. I hope other people are a lot higher and they can make me eat my shorts about this. Like, I truly hope that I'm just like playing the absolute safe card about this. And I'll be okay to go on a tangent later on and say, I was wrong. And I hope I am, for the record.
I hope you are too. Now, Christian, earlier this offseason, we saw Creighton get Coach Alan Huss from the mid-major ranks come over to be the coach in waiting at Creighton. And now we get a similar situation here where Matthew Driscoll leaves North Florida and comes to K-State to be an assistant head coach. Maybe a coach in waiting situation or something like that. Doesn't sound like that's the public word, but it could be what's going on. But how important do you think it is to get Coach Driscoll in with all his head coaching experience to help Coach Tang, who has all his great years of assistant experience with Scott Drew, but now has been the head man? How important is this going to be?
I think it's very important, because one thing had to change with that coaching staff. There had been something that changed. And I think the biggest addition that needed to change was bringing an offensive-minded coach. As I mentioned earlier in this show, they only average 70 points per game. That's not going to cut it in the Big 12. Absolutely not going to cut it. Now, I know we're talking North Florida here, but he was with the ASUN for quite some time. He's the most winningest coach in North Florida history and ASUN conference history. Last year, his team averaged 82 points per game. And let's add a little bit more to that, a little cherry on top, if you will. You talk about Marcus Johnson. You talk about Bashir as well, who are not afraid to shoot the three ball. Well, with North Florida last year, they had at least 13 three-point attempts in almost every single one of their games. They averaged just under 13 three-point assists per game. So 3-point attempts, excuse me. So I like where they're at here. Offensive efficiency, obviously that'll be a big issue. Can they be more aggressive offensively? And will Jerome Tang hand the keys to Coach Driscoll for the offense? That's what I'm absolutely hoping for. And if they do, and you talk about all these players that are coming up from the mid-majors, if you want to include Haggerty in this, please do. But Haggerty, you're talking about the Johnsons, Bashir, you're talking about these players that are at the mid-major level, that were successful at the mid-major level, and then you're bringing in a mid-major successful coach to be your offensive-minded guy. I love it. I think this could be a nice turning point for Jerome Tang's coaching career. And if not, then you have other problems to worry about. I think this might be the last, I don't want to say last saving grace for Jerome Tang, but we've known that he can take care of defense. We've known that for quite some time. Offense has always been that question mark. Now you bring in Matt Driscoll, a guy that has offensive-minded capabilities, maybe some of the best in college basketball, especially at the mid-major level. We've seen that for quite some time. If Jerome Tang fails at this with Driscoll, then I think that just shows, okay, it might be time to go in a different direction.
Well, we are going to see what happens in the Little Apple this year. Hopefully things go very well. Now, got to thank Christian so much for joining us on today's show, giving us all the great insight on K-State and PJ Haggerty and all the coaching news as well. Christian, great to have you, brother.
Appreciate it. Have me on anytime. Love talking ball, and I love Locked On College Basketball. And thanks again for joining me, Isaac. It was awesome. If you haven't already, guys, check out Locked On College Basketball. They have everything covered for you. It is amazing. And it's not just during the NCAA tournament. It is all season long. Andy and Isaac have you covered over there. Look, you can see my excitement. You can see my optimistic views, but you can see that I'm still cautious. And that for good reason. I think I need to remain cautious with this pickup. PJ Haggerty is a great pickup. It's a great piece, but it does give you a little bit of the Coleman Hawkins, PTSD, if you will, knowing that we were in that same type of boat last year and it didn't work out. What are the ways that we can make sure that this season can be different than others? Well, first thing that comes to my mind is you got to start off strong. You absolutely have to start off strong, and that is all because of the non-conference schedule. Jerome Tang, I'm hoping, learned his lesson. Whatever happened last year, I am willing to forget it. I am willing to move on, Jerome. I am willing to forget about last season if, and only if, we can make sure we start off strong in that non-conference battle. That has to happen. We can't go into Big 12 play with our basically one hand tied behind our backs. As I told Isaac, it didn't really matter that we beat Kansas in Manhattan. It didn't matter that we beat Iowa State in Ames. Teams don't beat Iowa State and Ames. Kansas State did that. That should have meant a lot more last year. But the peaks and valleys the entire season just wasn't enough to help them get in the tournament for the second year in a row in a team that was so much more talented, I think, even than what we are right now with PJ Haggerty, but they just underperformed. I think PJ, especially if he can bring a front court player still to this roster, can elevate the rest of the roster up to his ability. And with 21 points per game he scored last year, if he can facilitate just a little bit more, find a way for this team to rebound, this team should easily find themselves at the very minimum on the 8-9 line when it comes March, when it comes to Election Sunday. So that's what I'm hoping for. I hope that's exactly what we get. I mean, I'll take even better, but if that's our floor, count me in. I've seen people on social media still not being excited about this pickup and what's going on with this roster, and I completely get it. Because I'm in that same boat right now too. I can't go from a complete shift of being underwhelmed about this roster and then blink and overnight be completely ecstatic. I just can't. I won't let my heart do it. So, although I'm excited and I can't believe I love the Matt Driscoll pickup, I think that is probably the most important pickup of the entire offseason. And of course, you match that with PJ Haggerty. I still want more. Give me a little bit more, Jerome, and then we can be okay. All right? It's a good dinner. The appetizer was okay. Finish it off with a prime dessert to finish off this roster. And I think front court would be the creme of the crop. All right? The cream of the crop. Give it to me. Thanks for listening for this episode of Locked On Kansas State. If you haven't already, click subscribe. We are growing. We are bringing you content every single day like no one else does, your team every day. Please like the video. Please subscribe. And this has been Locked On Kansas State.